Recently, while sorting out minor reads, I found myself reading again a few of my all-time favorites, and I newly realized the greatness and the importance of one specific masterpiece. Let's put it like that: if you love Berserk and Miura in general, but also if you like Chainsaw Man and Fujimoto, or if you're a fan of crazy demonic transformation like Ichigo's ones, there's a shonen manga that comes before all of them, and served as a huge inspiration to an incredible amount of authors and stories, to the point where it's been recently reinterpreted and remade by Yuasa. You may know Gonagai for his big and colorful robots. I prefer to remember him for Devilman. Devilman is probably one of the most influential manga of all times, selling millions of copies and being one of the most revolutionary for pop culture in general. Many authors, amongst which, in fact, Miura himself, publicly said to have taken a lot, both in their style and in their themes, from Gonagai's colossal masterpiece. It tells the story of a hero that's granted the strength to fight for what he believes in, but that says everything and nothing. Maybe it's just a story about a mystery and the adventure to uncover it, or maybe about a friendship broken in tragedy, or maybe about the eternally enduring fight between good and evil. Maybe it's about all of these things, or maybe about none. But let's start off with a brief explanation of the plot for those of you who don't know, and for those that need a refresh, just to get to understand what really stood the test of time in terms of narrative tropes. And I promise I'll be quick since this is not the main point of the video. Devilman is the story of Akira Fudo and Ryo Asuka, two childhood friends meeting again after some time, during which Akira has been living at his childhood friend's house because his parents are abroad, and Ryo has been experiencing his father's death due to a mysterious demonic possession. After revealing so to Akira, he invites him to embrace his father's legacy by merging with a devilish entity to protect the world from demons that, according to his researches, have been hiding from humanity for centuries through hibernation. Akira is possessed by this demon named Damon during the iconic Saba scene, and he becomes, guess what, Devilman. Then Ryo and Akira start using Devilman's powers to fight other devils to save the world and stuff. They travel through space and time in controversial reinterpretations of many historical events, till Ryo betrays Akira, showing to the world his friend during a transformation, and putting the blame on him for the devil's rising aggressions on humans. Akira's childhood friend and crush, Miki Makimura, is killed by a group of people who've lost their mind over devils, and Akira finds out Ryo is actually Satan, who's descended amongst men with no memory of himself to study the race of man. The final showdown between the two of them ends in tragedy, with Akira dying next to Ryo, and Ryo found and presumably executed by the hosts of angels descended from heaven, so that the world can start again. Okay, so I skipped a few things and I cut it maybe too short, even oversimplifying it, but that was on purpose because these are the most crucial pieces of information you have to keep in mind from now on. The heroism embodied by Akira inspired the idealistic protagonists of many stories that came after, but that alone wouldn't be enough to call Devilman a common point of reference and inspiration. On the other end, there are a lot of tropes adapted by the story that revolutionized shonen, and not only shonen down the road. So we'll start from the first trope that stood the test of time, the inner demon trope. So many manga and anime deal with, or even revolve around the inner demon trope, which is, if you don't get it by the name itself, the case in which the protagonist has some sort of demon inside of himself, whether it's just a part of his personality or some ancient force sealed inside of him for any possible reason. This deals with the theme of the double, like in Bleach, and partially in Chainsaw Man, with the theme of the other, like in JJK and Naruto, and the loss of self-control, like it is in Berserk. And in the case of Devilman, it's more like two entities merging together, one lending power to another without interfering. And that's because since Akira is pure-hearted, he is not subject to the influence of Amon's control, unlike Ryo's father, except for the time he met Neike. The most similar to this concept is some way Chainsaw Man's case, with Pochita and Denji, with the obvious big difference of them being friends before the fusion. In fact, even though Amon's been gifted a spin-off entirely dedicated to him, he's not really a proper character in the original Devilman. It's just said he's an incredibly powerful demon, but nothing more. Akira, after the possession, changes slightly his appearance, and sometimes cruel and savage traits that are not part of his personality emerge, but except in one specific scene of the time travel sequence, there's no sign of Amon as an entity of his own, as an independent conscience. Another recurring element in manga, whether it's shonen or seinen, but frankly in literature in general, is the rivalry trope, which can take different forms depending on the story. But before moving on, you could take a moment to like and subscribe this video, since the wide majority of the people watching them are not subscribed. It costs you literally nothing and helps me a lot. Now we can move on. Rivals can be simply opponents, both talented and getting in the way of one another. They can be friends, pushing each other to improve and so on. And in the case of Devilman, rivals are not even properly so till the end of the story, since Ryu and Akira are simply two childhood friends who find themselves on the opposite side of a battlefield after a betrayal and the revelation of Ryu's true identity and intent. I don't need to tell to which comparison all these hints will lead us to. This exact trope of a friendship broken through lies and betrayal is embraced and embodied perfectly by Berserk's protagonist and early deuteragonist, Guts and Griffith. Through this so-called golden age, their bond does nothing but grow, till Guts realizes how Griffith perceives him and the other members of the band. When Guts leaves, Griffith's obsession for Guts emerges, and he loses his mind, never forgiving him. And that's why, at the moment of the eclipse, thinking that the only person that stood in the way of his dreams was Guts himself, he accepts to sacrifice the entire group to ascend. And even from an iconographic point of view, the comparison matches perfectly. Akira, when transformed into Devilman, looks exactly like the devil himself as is represented in medieval's fine art, and Ryu is pale, blonde and quite feminine, all traits symbolizing purity and brightness, whilst in reality it's vice versa. The darker and scarier one, in both cases, is actually the good one, the human, and the other one, in one case being the fallen angel himself, in the other being a deity ascended, represents cruelty, suprematism and evil. Obviously, we can't talk about Devilman without talking specifically about Akira as a protagonist. And if you take a look at Gunagai's mecha protagonists, compared to the later Gundam and Evangelion quote-unquote heroes, they are really superhuman, fearless, tactless, sure of themselves, whilst kicking the crap out of the most absurd alien creatures. But on the other hand, Akira is a way more human and frail protagonist. He starts as a loner and quite a loser. But after the transformation, something changes. With great power comes great responsibility, some guy born 10 years prior would say. And that's precisely what Akira realizes, taking seriously his role of protecting humanity, whilst being as fragile as any other human. Just to be in the end deprived of the one he loved, and betrayed by the only one he trusts. And still he fights, although in tears, hence the crybaby thing. A battle lost from the start, against an enemy out of his league, with the only consolation of a god he won't see spreading the light on a war that's meant to end. Akira is not only the prototype, but the ideal any hero running on Shonen Jump and not only tried to follow, oftentimes failing. Yet the epic of a simple human embracing his role in a path of growth to maturity still inspires, as the light at the end of the tunnel, any aspiring mangaka in his stories. I may have gotten a bit too emotional, and it might have sounded a bit redundant, but I guess you got the point. So, there's a lot from Devilman that stood the test of time as you've seen, but has the manga itself stood the test of time as a whole? Well, the answer is yes and no. There's a lot of the original Devilman that aged like Steph Curry, but also a lot that aged like Ben Simmons. The introductory chapter, with its excessive and redundant dialogues, necessary as a presentation of the characters and the setting on a magazine like Shonen Jump. The characterization of Miki, definitely stereotyped and never evolving. The organization of the plot itself and so on. But for that, there's Devilman Crybaby. Yuasa's reinterpretation of Gonagai's original work is astounding. Great in its design, in its concept, the animation style, the pacing of the narrative, the noteworthy innovation and differences in the character's background and evolution, which almost 50 years apart became more gradual and thus more human. The final reference to Evangelion with the Red Sea scene, and the soundtrack. The damn soundtrack is full of bangers. I might sound like a Crybaby fanboy at this point, but trust me, it really is. So what I'm saying is Crybaby is how a remake should be done. But nonetheless, the original is a blast to read too. Some of its panels and character designs have been referenced a countless number of times, and its story has been so influential and relevant in the grand scheme of things that I truly consider it a must-read. Because it's sort of the manga that started it all for the protagonists of the later generations. And with that, the video is done. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did in making. And I want to thank you all because the channel has grown tremendously since the Goku Rakugai video dropped. And I'll try to keep it up, pumping out new content in the following weeks. So, thank you all. And let me know what you think about Devil Manir down in the comments. See you in the next one, guys.